There's a version of this story where a man breaks every rule of American politics, gets laughed at by everyone who matters, and wins anyway. That version is true. In November 2016, every poll, every newspaper, every expert had already written the ending. They were all wrong, and not by a little. What happened that night wasn't luck, it wasn't chaos, and it definitely wasn't an accident. It was a strategy hiding in plain sight, one nobody recognized until it was too late. This is how Donald Trump rewrote the rules of American politics, while everyone else was still playing the old game. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. But to understand how it ends, you have to go back to where almost nobody was taking it seriously. Go back to June 2015. Trump rides an escalator down into the lobby of Trump Tower and announces he's running for president. The establishment doesn't just doubt him, they laugh, loudly, openly, on every late-night show in the country. The political press treats it as a publicity stunt, a real estate mogul chasing attention, a story that would burn out by autumn. 17 candidates were in that Republican field. Senators, governors, a former frontrunner with a famous last name, and a war chest to match. On paper, it was one of the deepest benches either party had assembled in a generation. The betting markets put Trump near the bottom of all of them. But here's what none of them realized. Trump wasn't losing their game. He was playing a different one entirely. And by the time they figured that out, the board had already changed. Move one, the part nobody admits. Trump didn't just use the media. He turned it into a weapon and pointed it at itself. Ask any political consultant and they'll tell you the same thing. Paid advertising is expensive, but free coverage, what they call earned media, is worth far more because people trust it more. A candidate who can dominate the news cycle without spending a dime has an advantage money can't easily buy. Through the 2016 primary, by most estimates, Trump pulled in around $2 billion worth of that free coverage. Some analyses put the figure even higher across the full campaign. His closest rivals got a fraction of it. Now here's the twist. A huge share of that coverage was critical, negative, hostile even. And it didn't slow him down. If anything, it did the opposite. Because attention is the currency, not approval. Every panel debating whether he'd gone too far this time was, in effect, a free commercial, running his name, his face, and his message in front of millions of people, over and over, around the clock. Think about how this works. A traditional candidate says something carefully calibrated, and the press moves on in an hour. Trump says something explosive, and the press covers it for 3 days, then covers the reaction, then covers the reaction to the reaction. One sentence could own a week of airtime. The outlets believed they were holding him accountable, exposing him, scrutinizing him. What they were actually doing was handing him the largest free advertising campaign in the history of American politics. He didn't win in spite of the outrage. He won in large part because of it. But controversy alone doesn't win elections. Plenty of loud candidates flame out. The second move is the one people forget, and it's the one that actually mattered. For about 30 years, the working class across the industrial Midwest had been handed roughly the same speech. Globalization is painful, but it's inevitable. The factories aren't coming back. The future is in services, in technology, in cities. Learn to code, retrain, adapt. Nobody ever really asked them if they wanted to. It was presented as weather, something that simply happens to you, that you have no say in. And the numbers behind that speech were real. Entire towns built around a single plant watched that plant close and never recover. Main streets emptied out. The good union job that could support a family on one income became a memory people told their kids about. Both parties, for decades, had largely accepted the same framework. The disagreements were about how to soften the landing, not about whether the plane had to crash. Trump didn't show up with a policy binder or a 10-point plan. He showed up with something far more powerful: acknowledgement. He said out loud on a national stage what millions of people had been thinking privately for years: that the deal they'd been handed was a raw one, that the people who designed that deal didn't live anywhere near the places it hollowed out, that somewhere along the way they had been written off, forgotten, You can argue about whether his solutions were realistic. That's a fair fight, but that's not what moved people. What moved people was the simple, almost shocking experience of a candidate at the top of the ticket saying, I see what happened to you, and it wasn't fair. This was never purely about economics. Plenty of his supporters weren't destitute. It was about dignity, about the difference between being struggling and invisible. And Trump made them feel seen, or at the very least made them feel like someone finally was looking. That is a political skill, a rare one. And it's the part his opponents never figured out how to answer. Because while he was building that connection, they were reaching again and again for a playbook that no longer worked. Marco Rubio, young, polished, disciplined, went after Trump on policy specifics and debate stage fundamentals. When that failed, he tried to beat Trump at his own game, trading insults. It backfired badly. He looked like a man borrowing a weapon he didn't know how to hold. Jeb Bush, the early frontrunner, the safe institutional choice, raised and spent well over $100 million running a textbook, traditional campaign, polished ads, big endorsements, establishment muscle. He didn't make it to the spring. None of it worked. And the reason it didn't work is the single most important idea in this whole story. They were all optimizing for a game nobody was playing anymore. Picture a chess grandmaster, a lifetime of study, every opening memorized, every endgame mapped, decades of discipline poured into mastering the rules of the board. Then, someone sits down across from him and starts playing checkers. The grandmaster is baffled. This isn't how the game is supposed to go. These aren't the right moves. By every standard he's trained his whole life to respect, his opponent is doing everything wrong, but the crowd that gathered to watch doesn't care which game it is. They didn't come for the rules, they came for the spectacle. And the checkers player understood that the audience was the real board all along. That's the trap his opponents kept falling into. They kept trying to win on points in a contest the public had stopped scoring. And here's the part that should genuinely unsettle anyone who studies this. In 2020, his opponents made the very same mistake, just from the opposite direction. This time the bet was that if you simply documented his flaws thoroughly enough, cataloged every controversy, every falsehood, every norm broken in exhaustive detail, the weight of the evidence would eventually break the spell. They were, in a sense, waiting for gravity to reassert itself, waiting for the normal rules to come back and pull him down to earth, the way those rules always had for everyone before him. The gravity never came. He lost that race, yes, but far more narrowly than the people most confident in his collapse had predicted. And he didn't disappear. He didn't fade quietly into retirement the way defeated candidates almost always do. So here's the uncomfortable truth most commentary still refuses to sit with. You don't have to like what Trump did to understand it. And understanding it is the entire point of an honest look at this. Strip away for just a moment how you feel about the man. And what's left is a kind of raw, strategic instinct that comes along maybe once a generation. He identified a gap, a real one. The growing distance between the political class and a huge segment of the people that class claimed to speak for. He built a direct line to his audience, first through dominating traditional media, then through social media, that bypassed every gatekeeper who used to stand between a candidate and the public. And he pulled off the hardest trick in politics. He made attacks on him feel, to his supporters, like a tax on them. So, every assault from the press or his rivals didn't peel people away. It pulled them closer. By the time he faced serious legal jeopardy, that bond was so strong that, at least among his core base, the indictments seemed to harden their loyalty rather than shake it. His support didn't crater the way conventional wisdom said it had to. Almost everyone underestimated him. Almost everyone predicted he would fail. Almost everyone was wrong, but, and this matters, understanding the strategy is not the same as endorsing the consequences. Because there's a cost to this playbook, and an honest analysis has to name it. When attention beats accuracy, the loudest voice wins, not the most truthful one. When every institution that tries to check you can be reframed as an enemy, you weaken the very things a democracy depends on to function. When supporters are taught that an attack on the leader is an attack on them, criticism stops being information and becomes betrayal. And that's a dangerous place for any country to be, regardless of who's in power. The same instincts that made this a brilliant campaign strategy are the instincts that critics argue did real damage to American institutions and norms. Both of those things can be true at once. A method can be effective and corrosive at the same time. Pretending otherwise, in either direction, is how people keep getting this story wrong. And that's really the lesson here. Not whether you cheer or boo, but whether you can see clearly. Because the experts who missed Trump in 2016 decided the problem was a polling error, a technical glitch. So they adjusted their models, refined their methods, fixed the polls. And in 2020, they missed him again. Maybe the problem was never the polls. Maybe the people whose entire job is to explain politics had spent so long inside one set of rules that they couldn't see those rules had already changed underneath them. They kept asking the wrong question. Is this man a good politician by the old standards? The right question, the one almost nobody wanted to ask, was simpler and far more disturbing. What happens when someone breaks every rule and wins anyway? What does that tell us about the rules and about how fragile they were to begin with? Because the rules haven't snapped back into place. They're not going to. Something shifted, and it shifted permanently. The tools are visible now. The strategy is out in the open for anyone paying attention. Dominate attention. Speak to the forgotten. Turn every attack into fuel. Bypass the gatekeepers entirely. Which means the next person who understands all of this won't come out of nowhere. They'll arrive the same way he did, laughed at, dismissed, underestimated by all the same people who were so sure the last time. And by the time anyone realizes they were serious, the game will already be over. So the real question isn't about the last election, or even the next one. It's whether the people whose job is to see these things coming have actually learned anything at all. History suggests they haven't.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe and follow for more awesome content. See you in the next one. See ya!